Is there really that much of an uprising underneath the surface regarding Greenland?
I mean, look, Katie, one of the themes of the Trump administration, both the first term and now this one, is how far can the president go until he draws that criticism from Republicans? What is too far for Republicans up on Capitol Hill? What can they tolerate? It seems like one of those things that may be a bridge too far and intolerable for those GOP lawmakers is this rhetoric about Greenland. The president and the White House saying that all options are on the table when it comes to Greenland, including military intervention, is really causing concern among Republicans by and large. And you mentioned Don Bacon. He's been one of the loudest critics of this conversation and this floating, saying as recently as this week to a local outlet that if the president were to go forward with military intervention to take control of Greenland, it would be impeachable. And he believes that a large number of Republicans would follow him in that right. So certainly this is something that, of all the conversation we've had about President Trump drawing concerns from Republicans, wondering if it's a bridge too far for them to be comfortable with, the Greenland conversation, it seems like, has been in that territory. Now, I say it seems like because, of course, with the Republicans on Capitol Hill, you don't give them credit for going against the president until it actually happens. Case in point being this conversation and this situation involving the Venezuela War Powers Resolution. We saw 5 of those Republicans break ranks and vote to advance that War Powers Resolution. But a week later, after a heavy lobbying campaign from the White House, 2 of them flipped and essentially killed that effort. So we would have to see how a conversation about Greenland and the repercussions would take place if there were something like military intervention in the country. But certainly Republicans, led by, as you mentioned, Don Bacon, are making it very clear that would be a massive problem for them.
Yeah, no, what's interesting about this, and David, you write this, is whether that line shifts. And often before that line starts to shift, we see lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, try to interpret what Donald Trump really means, to try to say, oh, he might be saying that, but what he really intends is this. And we've been hearing that again from lawmakers today. You read all about it. You say this: Trump knows what he's saying and knows what he's doing or what he wants to do. When he speaks and when he acts, it's with deliberate intent. Congressional Republicans who oppose an American invasion of Greenland might want to ponder that rather than soothe themselves with fantasies that Trump's tough talk is about, quote, leverage.
Yeah, well, I think, Katie, when you look at the second term, and we're just about a year in, I think it's pretty clear that the president does what he says he's going to do. And when he's talking about something, it's not just conceptual. It's not just about poking the bear. I think in the first presidency, it was defensible for Republicans to presume that Trump didn't totally understand the ramifications of things that he would talk about. He was often advised against doing things that he wanted. So in retrospect, I think he should have been taken seriously then. He clearly needs to be taken seriously in the second presidency. But Republicans are caught in this box of disagreeing with President Trump, but not wanting to publicly disagree with him. And so they try to send these subtle signals to the president to back off, to look at something differently. And most of the time, it doesn't work. It works occasionally. I think we also need to point out here, and I'm sure you're going to get into this, that the president's claim that we need to acquire Greenland or China and Russia will are specious. Republicans understand this, at least Republicans on the Hill, and they're specious because Greenland is owned by Denmark. Denmark is a part of NATO. Russia and China are not going to make a move against a NATO territory. It would trigger Article 5 and potentially a huge conflagration. And so this whole idea that we can't use existing agreements to proliferate more military bases on Greenland to do the things the president wants to do is just not true. And so it's another reason, I think, why the president should be taken seriously here, because he's so far proven that he does not back down, even in the face of criticism and falling poll numbers.
I'm so happy you brought that up, because I was thinking about that very thing this morning, that the idea that we have to have it to deter China and Russia, and we're the only ones that can defend Greenland. It is a NATO country. It would be like Russia or China going after the UK or going after France or Poland. I mean, there is a reason why NATO exists. NATO is a collective of security between a number of nations. So it is as if we do own Greenland. On that note, and as you are there, you've been speaking to people. I mentioned at the top that people are taking this seriously. Tell me more about what you're hearing and what you're hearing from lawmakers in the territory.
Yeah, they're still worried, Katie. They're also waiting to see what happens next. I will say in recent days, we have been seeing this military buildup here in Greenland as the Danes and European allies ramp up their military presence here in Greenland and around the island. People here have been telling me that they find that reassuring. They're grateful that the Europeans are sending in reinforcements. At the same time, there's something a little bit bizarre about seeing these, Danish Navy ships around Nuuk, or we saw Danish C-130s landing at the airport last night. This is such a peaceful, remote part of the world, and I think it's part of what people love about living in Greenland is that they feel they're kind of isolated from the rest of the madness happening around the world. So there is something a little bit bizarre about seeing these ships and planes here in Greenland. We were at the airport watching one of those planes land last night. I asked some people who had gathered there to watch the plane's arrival what they thought about military buildup in their country. I'll let you listen to what one woman had to say.
Now he's talking about it's not only for the security, and he just wants the country, but you're not for sale. So that's our main goal, to explain that we are still people, really real people living here, and we want to be respected for that.
And she went on to say that she thinks this might be more about Greenland's vast, largely untapped natural resources. And we are expecting Greenlanders to make their voices heard tomorrow. There are two big demonstrations planned, one in Copenhagen outside the U.S. Embassy and one here in Nuuk outside the U.S. consulate, Katie.
All right, let me play Von Hilliard, who just spoke with the president, asked him about NATO and whether he would feel comfortable attacking NATO.
Mr. President, do you commit to not militarily engaging NATO partners?
I don't talk about that.
Mr. President,
You're not willing to commit to not attacking a NATO partner?
You urge protesters.
Commit is a better word here. He's asking the president, will he commit to not attacking our allies? And the president, ambassador, says, I don't talk about that. What?
What do you say, Katie? Honestly, what do you say at this point? I mean, this is such an extraordinary time. I am happy to see folks, in particular Republican members of Congress, start to speak out about this. Frankly, I wish that they had done it a year ago when he first made his threats vis-a-vis Greenland. I can tell you this, that whether or not Americans take these threats seriously, whether or not Republican members of Congress do, our great friends in Denmark and Greenland do. They take it extraordinarily seriously. So it is unthinkable that during our lifetimes, the president of the United States would not take military engagement against a NATO ally who has fought and died alongside us for the last 80 years. It's extraordinary that a U.S. president won't take that off the table.
So what could he do in Greenland by owning it that he can't do currently in Greenland, being a part of the alliance?
Absolutely nothing, Katie, is the answer to the question. So, and this is what drives me crazy about it, because the goals that they articulate, the national security goals and the economic goals, are achievable today. As David mentioned, we used to have 17 military bases on Greenland. It was the U.S., it was our administrations, Republican and Democrats alike, including Trump 1, who made a decision not to reinvest in Greenland, which we could do. And we have a treaty dating back to 1951 that would allow us to do that. In addition to that, there are existing relationships that we have with bilaterally, but with Greenland, that would allow us to go and mine for rare earth minerals. You know who would love that more than anybody else? The Danes and the Greenlanders. So these justifications are just bogus. They don't make sense. And it's very clear. To me, it's very clear. So it is hard to see.
Is there something else that we're missing here? I mean, if the U.S. owned Greenland and wanted to mine it for its resources, are there limits to mining it for its resources? Limits to what we can put on the island? Are there limits that Donald Trump wants to be able to blow through that he believes he'll be able to do by owning it? I mean, I'm trying to figure out something other than Donald Trump likes how big it is on a map and wants to put his name on it.
Well, I have probably little doubt that processes associated with mining could get easier if you remove all, say, environmental protections and environmental regulations and whatnot were the U.S. to own it. I suppose that's possible and maybe even logical. That being said, this can all get done. I mean, all you got to do is sit across the table from one of our best allies in the world, in Denmark and Greenland, and they would gladly make that deal. That's what they tried to do at the White House 2 days ago, and I don't think they got very far. I also want to say one thing. David made the case about national security. I would take it one step further, that actually this weakens American national security, that the idea of weakening NATO, all that does is empower our adversaries in Russia and China. I think this idea actually makes the United States weaker, not stronger.